So tonight's discussion topics will include, how can we leverage technology to streamline business operations? We'll talk about effective outreach strategies for approaching galleries, stores, and prospective clients. How do you build a successful online platform to sell your products? What are some new skills or resources that people starting out might need? Fair compensation in the flameworking industry. What's the going rate for assistant labor, skilled and unskilled? Hot topic. A budget for events, sales, and workshops. Do you use intelligence to streamline functions ethically? We want to give a big thanks to our sponsors for this meeting, Whale Apparatus. Whale Apparatus Company manufactures the finest selection of glassworking tools, supplies, and and equipment to research and production facilities, lampworking artists, and fused stained glass industries. Located in Hellertown, Pennsylvania, Whale has been in the glass industry since 1970. You provide the imagination, Whale provides the glass and tools. And I just want to add to that, Whale has all kinds of, like anything you might need, they've probably got it. And they also have a whole bunch of hard to find tools and equipment too, especially just incidentals that you might need for scientific glass blowing, especially. So put them on your supply list if they're not on there already, and hit them up when you're ready to make an order. To keep programs like the Flame Affinity Group accessible to the broader community, there are a number of ways that you can support GEEX. Buying merch through the GEEX shop, like our Better Together bandana, Vanessa German's generative poster on centering dimensional wholeness, or our collection of glassy mugs made in collaboration with Dr. Jane Cook. Subscribing or renewing your individual or school's GEEX Talks subscription, nominating GEEX for a Glassy Baby grant, or setting up an independent fundraiser on Facebook or Instagram. Contributions of any size help, and thank you for your ongoing support. This is our GEEX charitable Venmo account, so you can screenshot that and send GEEX some money if you're able to. That would be great. And just as a reminder, throw some support towards GEEX if you're able to. Any amount helps. Thank you all for being here and for spending your money. And please support them in any way you can so that we're able to keep going. So tonight we are, oh, can you go back to that last slide for a minute, I guess?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. So we have this idea to make a community source business practices tool. And I started a toolkit already, and we've invited our special guest here to join us. So we're inspired by these resources that are already in the resource exchange. So there are, you can find so supply resources for borosilicate glass, that's supply list with how to set up a studio. We have another document, tools and equipment for setting up a flameworking studio. And then there's also a pricing structure worksheet, which also will help you think through how to price your products that you're making. And so what we're hoping to do tonight is to start to kind of flesh out a business practices toolkit that maybe is a little updated. Maybe there's some topics that aren't currently addressed in business topics curriculum that we can bring to the discussion tonight. So we are really interested in learning about what topics you think are important and what you have questions about involving running a business, starting a business, and anything kind of involved in that realm. So I just want to okay, thank you, Madeline. So I just want to introduce myself and my co-facilitator. My name's Amy Lemaire, and my co-facilitator tonight is Madeline Rile Smith. Can you just wave? There you go. We're your facilitators tonight. And so the way that this is going to work, because we have a lot of new faces tonight, thanks for joining us, is there's two ways that you can participate. One, you can work the chat. And also, if you would like to contribute to the dialogue verbally that's happening, please use the hand raise function, which is going to be on the bottom of your toolbar. And either Madeline or I will call on you to speak, just so that we don't talk over each other. So that's the way things are going to work tonight. So you have two ways to kind of participate. Now I would like to introduce our special guest for tonight, Wes Heart. Wes is based in Philadelphia. Wes is an artist, designer, entrepreneur. They do it all, and have a very successful e-commerce shop called Blob Blob Studio. Wes has taught business practices. Wes is a flame worker, kind of very much intersection in all these things that we tend to talk about in this group anyway. So we decided to invite Wes today as our special guest. So thanks for joining us, Wes.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And so what we're going to do tonight is, if anybody has a question for Wes at any point, you can ask or type it into the chat. And then we're going to give Wes special kind of accommodations tonight to jump in at any point they feel, inspired to answer or to participate in the dialogue. So cool. Special guest status. Thank you.
Amazing.
All right. Yes. So our agenda for tonight is we're interested in building a virtual toolkit for business practices. So Madeline and I have started an outline for one already, and she's gonna share it in the chat for y'all. So you can if you're interested, you can see what we're talking about with this business practice toolkit. And so as we are going tonight, as we're having our dialogue, I want to invite y'all to drop links to e-commerce sites as examples, or to any other resource that you think might be something we should include in this business practices toolkit. And if you don't have a link or you just have an idea, then go ahead and just make a note in the chat, because later on when we call all of the info from this meeting, I'm going to compile it all and flesh out this toolkit and put it in the resource exchange so that we can all use it. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Sound good? Okay. So we have a little icebreaker, as we like to do with the affinity group. And so tonight, our first prompt is if you could raise your hand and introduce yourself, tell us who you are and where you're coming from. And I have two questions. What has been some of the best advice that you have received from anybody, preferably about business practices or flameworking? And what advice would you give to somebody just starting out in flameworking? So if you feel inspired to contribute either of those questions, please go ahead and raise your hand and introduce yourself. Nobody. All right, let's see. Well, I have some advice. So some of the best advice that I've ever gotten was from my dad, great advice giver. And he told me when I was first starting out with my business, learn to do the task before you delegate. So, if I'm going to hire an accountant, great. Understand what it is you're hiring somebody to do before you hire them, so that A, you can trust them, and B, you can tell if there's an issue. And that will also help you communicate and appreciate the job that that person is doing for you or with you. So that's my contribution. Ghislaine, you can unmute yourself. Hi.
Hi. For myself, I would say for the flameworking and the business side is keep learning. Always keep learning. And never be afraid to ask for help. And never take a no as an answer.
I like that last one. I like all of that. Yeah, I think that those are all really important points. Thank you. Madeline.
One piece of advice that is really simple, but it stood out to me a lot when I took a class with Roger Paramore a while ago. He said, as much as you can, get paid to practice. So he was teaching like the class something really simple, like some basic, I don't know, blown ornaments or something that like you could learn how to do in a day or two, depending on where your skills were at. But like if you just keep doing that one thing over and over and over again, that could be a marketable, saleable, commodity for you. And at the same time, you're still building those hand skills. Even they're like transferable to any type of like flameworking skill that comes with striping on the color or shaping or blowing it out. And I think for everyone, there's a point where like you want to wait a little bit so that your skills are at the level where you can really feel comfortable and proud of selling and moving your product. But I thought that was just such a fantastic piece of advice for someone starting out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is really good. And then also there are all different markets. So, maybe entry level, you start at a market with a lower price point so that you can start to recoup some of the costs of your practice, because glassblow is expensive and we all have to try to support ourselves. So that's really great advice. What advice would you give to somebody starting out in flameworking? Anybody? Is anybody just starting out in flameworking? Carolyn. Hi. Oh. Okay. Hi, Wes.
Hey, I was just going to say, my advice would be to be patient with yourself more than anything, because it is very difficult to learn this. There's a reason it's such a small community. It's because it's difficult, and it's the access to the tools and all the knowledge to set things up, and for safety reasons, it's very difficult to even break into it. So when you're actually first learning, I think sometimes people expect to be good pretty soon. It takes many, many years. And so taking baby steps and being patient with yourself is really important.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Kayla. Hi. You can unmute yourself. There
you go. Just wanted to say that hours give you powers, so
Yeah.
Stick with it.
It really, yeah. And if you want to be good at what you do, you have to spend the time to do it. Like lots and lots of time. Yeah. Can be frustrating, but it is the truth. And be happy. I think be happy where you are. I think that's also like, give yourself permission to be not a professional perfection, give yourself space and time.
Yeah. I think in terms of starting a business as well, flameworking and the product making is only one of the many skills that you will need to hone. And so make sure that you leave time to get good at all of the skills that you're going to need, because just being a good flame worker is not going to make you a good entrepreneur necessarily. So yeah, sign up for those business classes, to study online. Go ahead, Madeline.
I think that's a great point. And my other advice for someone just starting out is, it's all about your community. That's so much of the strength and support, and what you're able to do is who you know and who you can help and who can help you. And I think with class we have this sort of like this communal this act where we help one another. We're close. We give and we take, and kind of just I just like to suggest like approaching the studio and life just with a spirit of generosity. Like, who can you help? Who can you give? And then that will come right back to you. And that's really everything. And I kind of noticed that too when I was even like in undergrad and I went to my first like gas conference or my first IFC conference. And another thing I noticed is like if I went like with my little like clique of friends from school or whatever, like we would just hang out with one another during the conferences, and it would be very easy to not meet new people and like just like not like hang out or like introduce yourself. It's easy to stay with a crowd you already know. So my other piece of advice is like in that type of social situation, try to go to like branch out and like sort of talk to people alone or do things alone or go visit studios alone. And it can be kind of really scary sometimes, but like once you do that and you get used to it, like it's so good for you, and you actually can have such a better, like stronger connections just by like taking that leap of faith and doing things like a little outside your comfort zone.
That's good advice. And on that note, I think one of the things that's special about the glass community, and especially the flameworking community, is it's small enough that pretty much everyone in the community is accessible. So if there's somebody's work that you really admire, or there's someone that you want to get to know, reach out to them. Online is a great way to reach out to somebody, but when you reach out, especially if it's to somebody who, you know, you think of as a mentor, do it professionally. You know, don't just say, hey, you know, like you're texting your friend, but reach out professionally, and show that you're serious about what you do, and you'll get a much better response that way. Professional.
Follow through.
And follow through.
I'll get people asking me things, and they'll send me a message, and I'll say, great, cool, let's set up a thing. And then they don't get back to me, and I'm like, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't respond. I don't respond to emails that have in the subject, hey.
Yeah, no, I don't either.
Yeah, you know, that's fine for if you want to approach your friends, but when you're talking about business or you're asking somebody for advice, have a little more formality, because it just the response will be met with more formality, you know, which is what you're trying to get out of the person.
The people that I do end up talking to or developing relationships with who want to visit my studio or want help with something, it's not that they're super formal, it's that they are polite and kind and understanding that I'm busy and they have, you know, we have things to work out, and it's not just, hey, can I stop by on Tuesday? And I'm like, I don't know who you are. It's like, you know, like develop some rapport before you jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So thanks for sharing your advice. That's a great way to kind of kick it off, get to know everyone a little bit. So I have a question for everybody involving fair compensation in the flameworking industry. Does anybody have any input? What's the going rate for assistant labor? Do you hire assistants? Do you work as an assistant? And how much do assistants get paid by the hour for flameworking labor? Skilled and unskilled, if that makes a difference to you. And your part of the country that you live in, I'm curious to know if that matters or not, if it's different regionally. So I would say, I live in Brooklyn, and there's the going rate for unskilled labor, meaning I'm going to need to do a little bit of teaching, is $20 to $25 an hour. And then skilled labor, meaning, you know, I don't have to teach them, they're already coming with skills, starts at 35 and goes up from there, 35 an hour. Anything less than those numbers is, everybody pays 25 and up around here. So that's New York City regional. So is it like that in other places, the country? How about Philadelphia?
I live in Philly, so I would say I don't have much experience with any of that because I don't typically work for others in flameworking, or I haven't. Those are the rates that I pay, so I'm not sure. Yeah, that's cool. Like just sort of, I definitely did not want to pay under 20 for any skilled labor. Yeah, I don't know what the actual, I would say that's totally reasonable. For skilled labor, for sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else? How's the Midwest? I'm from St. Louis. How's the West Coast?
Yeah.
How's a rural area, you know, different from an urban? Because I think living in Philly and New York is pretty expensive nowadays.
Actually, I don't know how many people we have from other regions of the country, so we might have to put a plug in that one. But Madeline, What do you have to add?
I was
You
an
agree?
artist assistant right out of undergrad in Philadelphia, and I assisted about $20 an hour, and it was all under the table, didn't pay taxes on it or anything. And also, at the time, I was out of undergrad, and I was doing it kind of for a friend, so it wasn't a rate I would do for like most anyone, but I also really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot out of it, and it was pretty like chill, and not really like physically demanding. So there was something to be said for that. But yeah, that was about like 9 years ago. So $20 an hour.
Wow. Yeah.
And Carolyn just says that they're in rural Virginia. So I don't know, Carolyn, if you have any info about pay rates for labor or not. You don't know?
I don't
Yeah.
know a whole lot. I know the closest spot is probably out in Richmond. I think it's called like
Yeah.
the hot spot.
Yeah.
But they and yeah, like Northern Virginia for sure. As far as I know, I think there's someone like up the road who's doing like kiln work and stuff. And so she would actually probably be someone to reach out to and see. I think she kind of just works on her own, but yeah, kind of what she's doing. Otherwise, I think it's just me. It's a really small community.
Nice. Well, I think one of the reasons why it's important to think about the rates or to know what the going rates for assistant labor is because when you're pricing your products and you're trying to make a good profit margin, then if you have a lot of experience as a fabricator, you're probably going to pay yourself more than you would pay an assistant. So you will have two labor rates there, yours and your assistants, who might be a different skill level. So you can leverage that with your products as far as who's making the products, how much is going into labor to produce these. And so that can be one way that you can help with adjusting your prices, is by hiring an assistant to help you make your work. It sounds like you're putting out a lot more money because you're hiring an assistant, but actually you can be saving money because you're saving the labor that you would pay yourself by hiring an assistant who works at a lower rate.
Yeah, it really depends on, honestly, for me, it always depended on how quickly something could be made or how difficult or how costly the materials are for balancing that out. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, when I hire assistants for my business, it's usually to do things that I don't like to do, or things that I'm not good at, or things that I don't have the equipment for. So a lot of prep, really. I think I always want my hands to make the final mark on the pieces, but I have no problem hiring somebody to like coil pot up some color, or make tubing, or pull points, or make some basic shapes, or color match a color. Those are all things that I hire people to do. A lot of prep. Yeah, I can do it, but if I can hire somebody to do the prep, I can be doing something else at the same time, and then that shortens my timeline to deliver the final product or piece, and then I'm able to pump out more. Yeah. All right. Oh, Madeline.
Oh yeah, I remembered about a year ago I was fabricating a large commission for some glass plants for Ebony Patterson, and I had to make like 400 like leaves that I assembled into large plants. And so I was hiring out some students at Salem and stuff to just make leaves for me, because they took me so many hours. And I didn't even really do it as an hourly thing, but I think I paid like $3 or $4 a leaf. And then I calculated how fast I can do it and like how many they can make an hour if they just do that. And like, so I wanted to equal to about like $30 an hour, like a little more or less depending on how much they made. But I just remember that's kind of like, if I'm like, whether I'm doing like what I would consider like maybe piecework that they can do on their own time, or if it's hourly, kind of like somehow working out so that they feel comfortable with it.
That's like 1099 work, which is like, pay per job versus pay per hour. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and depending how your business is set up, you might prefer one over the other. for, insurance reasons. In my situation, I would prefer to have have an independent contractor where I just hire somebody to complete a job, bring it back to me, when it's done, rather than paying somebody hourly in my own studio, because that means then I have to have all kinds of insurance to support that. So these are all like concerns to have, because if you are hiring assistants, you need to think about how to treat them ethically and how to build your business in a way that you're able to support that ethical treatment of your employees. Please think about those things. Yeah. One option is if there's a group studio nearby. This is a model that gets used in New York a lot, because there are a couple of big group studios that are easy to access. A group studio is a great place where you can work in the same studio as your assistants, because you're both coming to the studio independently, meaning you're liable for your own body and your own work and your own studio rental and everything. You're an autonomous renter, but you can be in physically the same space working near each other. So that's how a lot of people will work in a group studio. That's one model, but that's not always possible unless you have enough flame workers to support a situation like that. All right. So do we have any other thoughts about labor rates?
I don't know if this is super relevant, but it is important, I think. I think when hiring someone, it is important to remember that you are becoming a boss, and we don't see it enough often in the world, but you pay yourself last. Always. You pay your people first. If you can't pay your people, then you should not have them. And it may seem like, oh, but I need help. You have to figure out how to help yourself first before you hire someone. Because it's super, super, super important. Because I hear from people all the time, they work for someone, they don't get paid, and that is horrible. And I never want to hear that. That's important to me.
Yeah, that also gives you a bad reputation as a business owner. So, it might deter folks from wanting to work for you in the future. So, yeah, that's really great advice, Wes.
I'd say that's always very much like that is the number one thing with hiring people is you definitely take care of your people first. Also, if you take care of your people, they will take care of you. I have had some of the most incredible assistants because I think that I treat them well. At least that's what they say. So yeah, it's really good.
Same. They show up to help you out in the final stretch of the deadline. That's good employees, good people. Yeah. All right. And thank you for the reference, Helen. The document here, cross-pollinating with the hot shop. I haven't checked this out yet. Let's see.
It's old. It's from 2018. I kind of just canvassed everyone I knew to ask them about how much money they made, which was sort of a really intimidating thing to do. But then I spent a bunch of time just crunching the information. But I always wish, because I worked freelance graphic design before I taught, and there was an abbreviated version published in New Glasgow Review, but this is the whole shebang, all of the data is in this long form report. But as a graphic designer, back in the day, the AIGA, the professional org, you could just look up, going freelance rates for X level of a designer for this type of a thing. And I always sort of was jealous that the graphic designers got those cool resources and we didn't have shit. So this is my attempt to try to do something to fill that gap.
Well, thank you for your service and for trying to fill the gap. Also, I wonder if that's a consequence of having kind of a small community as well, where there just aren't a lot of, I would think that there would be a lot more graphic designers in existence than glassblowers maybe, so there'd be more folks to compile something like that, possibly. Also, in the toolkit already, there's a wage calculator. website, and a budget calculator as well. So I found these to be fairly helpful. The wage calculator, I believe, is like a kind of an idealistic sort of setup for like calculating a living wage. But I have seen institutions using it as a reference and using it as a point to try to get to. So I think it's a good benchmark for something to shoot for if you're not already there, and something to know about. Because ultimately what we're trying to do when we talk about labor is to arrive at a point where labor is appreciated and valued, and also our employees and ourselves can make a living wage that's fair. And as the economy shifts, that point also shifts. So that's why we're discussing it today. All right, so, Wes, you're gonna like this topic. How do you build a successful online platform to sell your products? You are very good at that.
You just do it. No,
You just do it? You
just do it. It's so easy. Are you asking me that directly? Because I have a lot of thoughts.
Yes.
Okay, so a couple of things I would start as a preface. Web shops they can be very easy. They can also be very difficult. I found that I had a Shopify for a little while. That was too complex for what I was doing because I was uploading new items. Like I don't do a lot of reproductions of, like I have some lines that I make lots of, but even like a lot of my pendants that I make are unique in their own form. So I have to take photos of them as I make them. So I have to constantly be updating my page. Shopify was a little bit difficult to do that too because it was so complex to have to upload everything. I'd have to change it all the time. I use Big Cartel. It's a very, I would say it's very simple. It's too simple for what I actually want. But I don't have programming knowledge in order to like alter it enough. And again, because I have to change it so often, hiring somebody to do that would actually be not functional for me so I just sort of use what I can. So I use Big Cartel. But the other thing I would say is learning how to take photographs of your work as best you can with the time that you have. So if I have, I should do this more, but I should hire models and I should do more setup of taking photos. I just end up trying to do the best I can to upload what I have so that I can get it online. I guess advice for that is find the site that is the least expensive to run, that is functional for your business specifically. So if you have like 5 items that you sell regularly and they're roughly the same every time, maybe a simple website that doesn't cost $40 a month is where it's at. I think my Big Cartel cost me like $23 a month, which is very inexpensive for, I think it's up to 500 items, which is a lot. Like I don't have near that, but I do have like, what's nice about that is when I do sell something that's a one-off, I can leave it on the website rather than taking it down, so that it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes people are like, hey, can you make another one of these? And I have to say like, no, I don't make reproductions of that. And they say, well, why is it on the site? I'm like, because it's a place that I can leave it, that it becomes sort of a gallery, an online catalog of what I've made. I guess take your time. I think that's the biggest. Like I didn't start my website with like everything I had. I started my website with like 3 things and like hoped that people would see them, and like little by little. I think I started all of this in like 2017, really, my Big Cartel. And it has changed over the years, and it's due right now for an update. I've been thinking about like doing a whole new thing. But it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to learn how to use the software, but then also to like tweak it. So like you have to tweak it every, so often so that it suits your brand. and your goals. So if you're struggling to sell something because, or if you wish for something to sell more, an item, and you realize, oh, well, maybe it's because the picture isn't so great. You need to tweak that and do that. And then maybe move it over here so people see it first. Maybe take some, it's just a lot of like little tweaks that end up becoming something bigger.
Wes, do you, you don't have to answer this if it doesn't make sense, but do you think that there's like a appropriate price range for products that you're selling on an e-commerce platform versus some other platform like a gallery or an in-person, like brick and mortar kind of store? Is there a threshold?
I have thoughts. Okay. How do I say this? The reason I do what I do is because the way that I do it is because I found that working in the gallery system was really, really difficult to keep sustainable. Things have changed a lot in the past 10, 15 years. When I was originally going into galleries and all that, it was somewhat beneficial with like, you'd put stuff in the gallery, you'd get a cut of it. But the 50-50 cut is also wholesale. I want to say that is difficult because you have to price your work at a sustainable price point so that you can make profit off of it. And when galleries don't necessarily promote the way that they used to, they don't take the photos, they don't do a lot of the work that they are now making us do. And so I sort of realized that I was spending a lot of energy trying to just bare minimum make stuff so that I could sell it at a gallery and then getting just a little bit of, like half of the cut. And I think part of the thing that pushed me away from galleries was I kept on being pushed to lower my prices constantly, incessantly, every time. And I'm like, I can't, because I can't make art and not make money for food. Like, I have to survive or else there is no art. This is how this works. And so when I was first doing Blob Blob, I created Blob Blob outside of anybody's expectations. I wanted it to be a place where I could just do whatever I wanted. And it wasn't necessarily a place to make money. It was a place for me to experiment and make work and just sort of play. And little by little, it became more and more of a business. And I guess part of the whole thing was trying to figure out a price point that I could engage with people that would love my work and be able to afford it on a larger scale. Because when I started making work many, many years ago, it'd be like, here's this $10,000 sculpture. I spent a month and a half like working on it. I have to sell it for this much, otherwise I can't afford life. And it just got very difficult. So I realized, and the people that were interested in them or buying them were not necessarily looking at the time for me, looking for my artwork. It was more of like, how do I invest in this? Because I know you're going to be a better artist in the future. Like, it was an investment. It didn't feel like a piece that they felt like they could love and have. Does that make sense? And when I started making smaller pieces that were more affordable, I really loved the accessibility for a broader audience to have that. And that I was drawn to, like the $100 and below, really drawn to that because I could spend a reasonable amount of time on a piece, sell it, and then that person would have this thing that they loved and that they would cherish and that they could show everybody. And it just felt really nice to have that be the feeling that I got from my audience versus I think I felt like people were trying to like look for a tax write-off or like an investment, and I just wasn't where I wanted to put my eggs. Yeah. Did that answer? I don't know.
Yeah. I noticed a shift. So you make wearables as well as other items, home decor items and sculptural items, right?
Yeah.
So I also do some wearables as well, and I noticed just not necessarily even just glass, but beyond that in the bespoke jewelry world in general. A few years ago, there was a big shift that happened, and that shift was that the markup for wholesale products went to over 50-50. So for many years, like when I was coming up, like the keystone, they call that keystone, right? The markup from, like, if I sell my product to a store for, let's say, $20, they would then double that and sell the piece for $40, and then you split the profit, right? So for years and years, now Keystone's 2.8. And so that's a little bit of a different paradigm. And also, I think that made me think twice, because I think, well, I'm putting all this work into this piece, and this is like an idea I really care about. And it just doesn't seem right that the person who is selling it is making more than I am, like a lot more than I am.
For me,
Yeah, and that's across the board in the jewelry industry. And so what you've seen in the last 5 years or so, and this coincides with when you started your store, is a lot of the jewelers who used to sell at brick and mortar, who used to do wholesale, who used to do the wholesale shows, now have an e-commerce site where they still do those things, but they sell but they sell products like earrings in particular online, because earrings are hard to make more expensive, right? Because it's like what the market will bear, and then also it's hard to make them at a low enough. It's hard to get the price point right on the earrings to where it's viable product for you to produce and you're making a profit, and then it's still, you can produce enough of them and your clients like them, and it's sort of a magic formula. So that's just one of the trends that I've noticed.
I would love to price my earrings at $20 a pair. I'd love that, but it's just not sustainable. It just isn't. I would love to. I think the wholesale thing that you brought up is important, but the one thing I wanted to also mention is the reason I learned how to do the website and started selling all of that online really was because I realized if I could have a shop that people actually would go to, because when I started for like a year and a half, I'd get a little bit of traffic. There was a whole year where I sold 3 things. The first year I was just I sold 3 items. And that was really kind of woo, I sold 3 things. But still, I realized that if I was going to put that much energy into making this work and not put it out into the world on a platform in which I could make most of the profit, then I'm literally just working myself to death to give it to someone else. And even I would say, I don't do this because I've heard too much about it, but I don't use Etsy at all. I think people that use Etsy and are successful at it are doing well, but I think you have to be a really good Etsy seller, meaning you have to produce a lot of work. You have to become one of the people that's highlighted on their top seller pages, because if you're not, you are spending a lot of money. They are taking a big cut, and they aren't promoting your work the way that you would like it to be. And so if you can be your own everything, photographer, marketer, if you can do that, it's hard, but I make the profit over somebody else doing it.
I'm just going to add a little note here. While you're talking, it just occurred to me that for our toolkit here, a template for making a line sheet might be really helpful. And for those of you who are not familiar with a line sheet is basically a catalog listing with a photo, price point, and details about each piece. And this is there's a particular format that's industry standard that's used for selling your work wholesale. But if you're going to sell your work at all for yourself or for somebody else, you need to have all this information readily available. So to get at what Wes was saying, if you're going to go through all of the work of photographing your work, compiling all of the info, right, you might as well just put it on your follow through and put it on a website and list it yourself, because you're going to need to turn all of that info over to the brick and mortar store who's going to sell your work, right? They're going to use your photos. They're going to use that info.
Can I hop in
So,
as an
sure.
just to add to that? And for anybody that's beginning or is a student or whatever, like, I didn't just know how to photograph my work. I didn't know how to just do this. Like, I started in undergrad, like taking the best possible photos I could. Like, little steps will get you to where you are. So like, you have to start somewhere. Just start little, and like, really, if you can get paid where you are to make work and then sell it, and you are supported, and you're not necessarily buying all of your materials, buying your gas, renting your space. Like, the only way I could possibly do what I do now is because I built up those skills to be able to do them, you know? Yeah.
I also put in the chat a link to a photo cube, which is what I use to take my product photos. It's like, it's not that expensive. It's a good investment. This one's about $100, and it's a 27-inch cube with LED lights in it and a clean background. And that and a phone camera is really all you need. And there's all kinds of YouTube videos online about how to get good product photos with your phone. Just watch a couple of those, give it a shot.
Everybody, you should go download the app Lightroom for your phone right away. It is basically Photoshop for your phone, and it is very simple, and it makes the most beautiful. The better your image is when you first take it, the better your image will be when you edit it. I would also be very wary. Be careful not to over edit any photo, meaning like, don't delete things that are problematic on your piece. Like, don't do that. Like, if your piece is flawed, your piece is flawed. Like, you know, like, take the bet. If there's dust on the ground where you're taking a picture, you can take that up. That's, yeah. Don't make your work look so good that when somebody gets it, they're like, what the hell? Don't do that.
Yeah, that's good advice. Instead, turn it around so the flaw's in the back.
No.
No, I'm just kidding. You need to be clear about all that. Typically, in a product listing, you would have multiple views of the same piece, so that the potential buyer would be able to get like a virtual experience of this piece before they purchase. So you want that to come through. And a lot of your clients they're going to know your piece is handmade, and there's going to be some variation in the pieces anyway.
Also explain that. I would say that, like, there are things about my pieces that I do not have control over. For example, some of the dichro glass that I get, it's not always the exact same color that I say it is. Meaning, if somebody buys a rose gold pendant 1 month, and then 6 months later I get a different sheet of rose gold, they're the same range of colors, but the supplier actually tells me, like, they don't do color matching, they do a range within that spectrum. So it could be a little more pink or it could be a little more orange. And so in my listing, I say, this is a range of color. The photo of the piece is what it looks like. However, sometimes the rose gold looks a little more pink. Sometimes the rose gold looks a little more orange. Yeah. So be honest with your buyers, because they will appreciate it.
And to circle back to, you mentioned Big Cartel. I also use Big Cartel. Big Cartel is a nice introductory website to use, because there is a free access level where you can list up to 5 products. So if you want to jump into the e-commerce space without a lot of overhead, just kind of dip your toe in, that's a good one to start with.
Yeah, and they have a lot of tutorials online, but it's very easy. The one thing I would love if they would change is that you can put 5 photos of an item and no more. So per item, you can only put 5, which is too limiting in my desire. But it's also kind of nice that I'm limited.
Yeah, could always tile them.
Otherwise, I go crazy.
Okay. So Madeline, and then after this, we're going to switch, and Madeline is going to facilitate and for our second half here. So go ahead, Madeline.
Thanks. I just wanted to speak to a little bit of my experience with the online platform. I started doing Etsy in around 2009 and did it basically up until this past year. I had pretty good sales. And the thing I found about Etsy that was nice is that if you don't have a large online platform or presence, if you do it right and you have to get the SEO down and search engine optimization, stuff like that, get the tags, all of that, they will direct people who don't know you to your page. But I just got really fed up with the incredible fees that Wes mentioned. I mean, last time I checked, they took about 8%, which just really adds up, especially if you're doing something that's like, I would put like my lower end things like, you know, $50 and under on Etsy. And then for one-offs, having to taking photos for each one, make a listing for each one. So it really just only started making sense for me when I was doing objects that were like, okay, I can make this like implosion pendant. I know exactly the colors. Like I can just, you know, replicate that one. And that's what I call that one pendant. And then I say for each one, the chemistry of the color is dependent on the flame. There will be some variation. It could look like any of these pictures here, and that's a feature and not a flaw. So each one is unique. But I really have taken a break from selling things online. I kind of personally got tired of having some online platform be the middleman. So if I were to reapproach that, I would do kind of what you've mentioned here with the big cartel and stuff like that. But my favorite place to sell is kind of like, I see farmers markets being mentioned in the chat. I love doing demos at craft sales, holiday markets, stuff like that. Like I just adore just like putting things in a box, putting them on a table, and then just having them fly off the shelves, never having to see them again, never having to spend like 4 times the amount of time that it took for me to make the object in marketing, photographing, making the listing, just like get it out of here. And I'm willing to even like, you know, I don't have to add the fees on that Etsy or other platforms would take. So I'm just like, so long, goodbye. And that I really enjoy. And also the thing that I find a lot about, you know, I don't know if you find this, Wes, but with online platforms, I get so many people reaching out to me and asking, like, can you make me a blah, 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 like custom things that they want. And then just that amount of time, like I'll usually respond to that, but the amount of time that just is like the back and forth and the messaging, like that can add up to hours and hours, like before you even make these.
I actually stopped doing commissions for the most part because of that. And I used to do tons of them. And it would end up being like, I stopped doing commissions about a year ago completely, with the exception of very specific, like, hey, I have this thing and it really is meaningful to me. And I will give you the freedom to kind of do your thing. Sure. For the ones that are like, I want this shape and it needs to be like this, it would end up being literally like weeks of work. And then not all the time would they be happy, or it's just really too much. It's too much. I am my own artist. I am not your artist, I think is what I moved into. I wanted to say real quick about the big cartel. Also, you were talking about fees, like that 8% is huge. Big cartel actually will run my sales tax to the government. And so they actually collect, you know, when they make a sale online, they will take the portion, like you upload how much, like for me, Philadelphia sales tax is, then they will skim that off the top and then they will pay that for me so that I don't have to do the taxes to do that, which is like the less taxes I have to do, the better, because it's a nightmare. Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Mm-hmm. It's also very easy to do the pull the address and the information off of that and do shipping from that.
Mm.
On shipping, I think it's important to note, for those of you who don't know, there are these third-party shipping apps. Like I use Pirate Ship. I don't know which one you use, but they have.
What do you use? I use Stamps, stamps.com. Okay. It's not great, but it's working all right.
So here's the deal, pirateship.com, right? That one has negotiated rates with UPS.
Yeah.
So you can get like deep discounts on UPS. And that includes like if you need to ship stuff just for yourself, you can use that. So it's free to have an account. So it's Pirate Ship.
Yeah, mine with stamps.com, I get a huge discount because the more you ship through stamps.com, the more the discount is to a certain degree. Yeah, private ship's great.
Cool.
Awesome.
Also, along those lines, charge for shipping. I know it feels like, oh no, I'm adding another $10, $15 to your order. You're not. That is what it costs to ship the piece. The box, the cardboard, the wrapping, the card you put in there, all of that is money that you are giving someone. I understand that free shipping feels really good. It's expensive. Sorry. Helen?
I am realizing that GEEX made a mistake, and there's a bunch of people joining this call right now because in some places it said 7 o'clock Eastern and in other places it said 7 o'clock Central, and I'm so sorry for this confusion. That was completely our bad.
Oh, well,
Hey,
that's
everybody.
okay. And yeah, thanks for those of you who are just joining us, welcome. We're talking about business practices and we're making a business practice toolkit. So just to catch you up, our special guest tonight is Wes Heart of Blob Blob Studio. And you can scroll down the chat to get a link to their store, check it out. And we've just been chatting about online platforms and what skills are needed to run a business. So if you would like to participate in the conversation, you have two ways to do it. You can raise your hand and Madeline will call on you. She's our facilitator for the second half, or you can work the chat. So if you have any ideas about a resource that you might want to add to our business practices toolkit, pop it in the chat, please. And thank you for those of you who have already contributed. All right, Madeline.
Awesome. Thanks. Hi, everyone. This has been a great discussion so far, and just want to remind you guys that I just popped Wes's links in the chat to check them out if you're not familiar with his work, and also the doc to the business toolkit that is in progress. So check that out, and if there's anything you want to add, let us know. And then I saw a little earlier on in the chat, Carolyn asked a question, and she said, I'm hoping to set up a torch with a gallery studio this summer as part of a deal, like kind of a promotion workspace, etc. And is that she takes a commission of my sold work. What's a fair commission for the gallery owner to take in exchange for her promotion of my work? I too am interested in making smaller pieces this summer with accessible prices.
Can I get a clarification? Did she say the gallery owner's commission? What is the gallery owner's commission? Yes, okay. Typically it's 50-50. The nice galleries that I've worked with have been 60-40, so I would end up with 60. They end up with 40. Yeah, I don't know. I personally, if I have thought about having some kind of online gallery started, I may still do this. I may have an online gallery started for others. I've been thinking about it, but I would love to charge 20% and have everybody take 80, because Etsy, it would be great if, I don't know. It needs to be less. If you actually want to provide a platform for artists to be successful and survive, they have to make the money, and like the more artists that come together, I would assume you would sell more work. So then you would make more of those 20% to be able to afford the things. I don't know how it works really.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see, I see kind of her online presence on Facebook so far. It's a relatively new business. It's like kind of right across the street from me, so that's really nice. But I don't know really like who her audience is. When I visited the other day, there were people just kind of dropping in, and many of them are painters and like pottery sculptors. So I'm kind of, I don't know if there's like an open conversation with other people in her studio to be like, hey, do you feel like this has been a really successful promotion of your work? Do you feel like you're getting a fair deal? I know when we were first talking, she didn't really, like we were still kind of just talking at first. So she hasn't really said like what her commission is. And I wonder if that changes with us being kind of a small community and the rural community, and then her being a relatively new business. So it's definitely more to have a conversation about, but thank you.
50-50 is standard, I would say.
Awesome. Thanks, Carolyn, for the question. And that I want to just remind everyone here. I know we've got a lot of sort of younger people or more emerging artists and students, and I think that any and all questions are welcome, whether they're questions for the group or for our resident expert tonight, Wes. So please keep raising your hands. And I see Evan has his hand raised. Evan.
Can't hear you. Just
Sorry,
there you
hear
go.
me?
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to add like one quick thing that, I mean, I wouldn't say I have tons of commissions all the time, but I feel like one really easy thing that anybody can do is a lot of glass shops, they get requests from people to do things that they don't want to do. And sometimes a really easy thing you can do is just email them and tell them, hey, if you get some of those requests, you can send them to me. And I mean, that's a really simple thing that most of the time, yeah, there's somebody that will want to do that.
Oh yeah, I think that is a good point. Like if people ask me for something that I don't typically do, that's great. I think for me personally, I get a lot of like they want something that I make specifically, but they want it in a different color. Like so they want my work, but they want to curtail or they want a custom Blob Blob thing. That's their thing. That can be. I can't really give that to somebody else, but if it's something like, hey, can you make these vases? Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, because I often find myself either like on one end of the conversation or another where some random person is like, hey, can you blow this giant glass vase for me out of these colors? And I'm like, oh, I'm a flame worker. You don't know what that is. Let me like look at my, catalog of people I might be able to recommend you to. But that's a great point.
I do that.
Yeah.
I'll send people to people. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I haven't thought about like someone starting out, like just reaching out to even just shops or whatever and being like, hey, I'll be that person. Like if you have someone that wants something made in the hot shop or cold shop or whatever. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Evan.
Yep. You're welcome.
So keep the questions and thoughts coming. And I'm going to go on to our next question, which is, how have business practices changed in the last, however many years? What sort of trends do we see happening? What skills do we need as artists and makers trying to make a living in the field now that might be different from, a few years ago, from a decade ago? Is there any way we need to rethink or any things we might need to add to our business practices as a discipline? Wes.
Okay. I would just say that I noticed something recently. Saw something on Instagram, somebody talking about this. There's a trend I see that I am recognizing in which people are trying to make work that is fast and sellable and trying to post photos and trying to get it out into the world as fast as possible so that they can make the money that they need to make. And so what ends up happening is people will make fast art quickly that is a lot of times almost replicating other people's work, or it's within a realm of like, I don't know, a specific kind of flamework pendant. It's like it's like the mushroom pendants, I understand there is a market for that and people sell them. But when that becomes your entire business identity, that I think is actually very harmful to you. And you have to be careful that you are not just becoming an artist that makes products that are not from your heart or from your soul, because you will get burnt out very quickly. You will be exhausted and not want to do your work anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And it kind of talks to something that like is a little, it might not be what someone wants to hear when they're first starting out.
It's hard. Yeah.
You just want to make this much as you possibly can, make your $1 a minute or whatever it is and get it out there and move your product. But it's so true, because if you keep making your quick and easy mushroom pendants stuff, like I definitely, I was there when I was.
Almost all of us were there, I think, where we had to like figure out how to make, and it's totally fine to do so. I'm not saying that it is, I love making a good pumpkin. I love making fast work. I love it. But there is a point that it will ruin your ability to make your own artwork. You have to learn to start to shift towards making unique things that come from your own brain, your own ideas.
Yeah, I think, just adding on to that real quick, I think there's definitely something to be said for having a range of things. So maybe I'll make like a couple $100 wearable pieces and then some $20 mushroom pendants. And then of course, like the $20 mushroom pendants aren't going to be my signature piece. They're not going to be the thing that people say and they think, oh, that's mad hot glass or whatever. But that's for maybe those are for like the 18-year-old kids who only have $20 and they really, really want to buy something. But yeah, I think about like when you start to just commodify your time like that, where, I like to get in the zone and I like to time every single step of each production item I have and think, how can I trim down 30 seconds here and 30 seconds there? And that's a great fun exercise. But then you start thinking of all of your time like that. And okay, 5 minutes that I spend journaling or in my sketchbook, well, that's 5 minutes that I could have been making, however many dollars. And then you start to think about time in a confusing way. And so I guess my way of going about it is trying to find a balance. But I think that's an interesting thing to think about and a great point. Amy.
Just to kind of add to this discussion, I think that if you're first starting out and you want to make some designs that are kind of maybe you have a limited skill set in the beginning and you want to get paid to practice kind of thing. But as your business grows, then you need to start thinking about like marketing and advertising and also being a part of like a designer community, right? You design Flamework products, but you're still a designer. And so your designs are what you're selling. So putting some time aside for like research and development and to try to come up with something that's uniquely yours is also something that you should think about if you have a business. So maybe it's the last 2 weeks of the year or something. Set it a time, put it on the calendar and say, I'm going to come up with this many new designs and that'll be next year's product line. And that's how one way you can kind of keep it fresh.
Yeah.
Still stay on trend.
Yeah. And if anyone who's listening to this has this resonates with any of you, or you've struggled with this, or you found a way to work around it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think all journeys are really fascinating and interesting to hear about. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Amy, you're muted again.
Sorry. I just wanted to respond to your question about what skills do we need now and ask the group, how essential do you think social media presence is? Do you think that it's essential for every business, or do you think that it's not an essential skill? I'd just be curious to know how important people think that is and if it should be taught.
Evan.
I mean, maybe just speaking personally, but I think it's getting professionalized to the point now where like a lot of the people that I know that are doing it successfully are doing it with like people that are completely managing all the video and like photography. It's a production sort of. And I think increasingly it's probably likely that that's going to keep happening if people are looking at videos of things. It means a lot more work for people doing things, and that is hard. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe you guys have other ideas about it.
Yeah, I'm curious what people think. I started making like content and videos for TikTok and Instagram 4 years ago, and that helps create like a large reach with my audience. But I feel like more and more today in 2024. I kind of hear people talking about or seeing whispers of artists and makers feeling more and more pressure to make content out of their work and out of their process. Like you can't just go to your studio and make the thing. You have to go set up your phone, film your time lapse, make your TikTok, make your whatever, and show your product being made as like a way to market yourself, as a way to get out there. And I think that can be a fantastic way for people to reach new audiences and show the good stuff, show the the process behind the product, the stuff that people really want to see. But I'm also curious, like, do people feel, is anyone here doing that and feeling like, I hate it, like I wish I could just make my work? Or is anyone like, I love it? Is anyone like 50-50? Because like, you know, I loved it, and I noticed I would spend like an hour a day like editing my videos. If I'm making a piece and I'm like, I'm going to document this, it would take at least 3 times as long because I'm like setting my camera up or whatever, filming it. Takes a lot longer, and then editing. So it makes the process much longer. If that can reach 1 million people, that's great. But of course, now that like the algorithms, I feel like are shifting constantly. I used to have like a great handle on the algorithm. Now you never know. It's sort of like they're changing it a lot. I see Kayla says, I hate it, crying face. Yeah. And Amy asks, at that point, is your product the glass or the content? A fascinating question. And I would say, for me, I would say both.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wes, do you agree?
I will also say the ShamWow did not sell itself.
ShamWow.
And that's something that I sort of remember when I first started doing all of this, is that like they had the stupid towel that soaked up more water than most or something. That's where marketing comes in. I know it sucks, and I'm not a big fan of doing the stuff that I do. But when I do a good reel and it does work well, and I do get the ride the algorithm or whatever you want to say, I sell a ton of stuff. And then like when it's not doing well, I don't sell as much, and it sucks. And it is not fun when it is not fun when it is not going well. I will say it is kind of fun for me when it is going well, because then I feel like, oh, I did something right. Like it's sort of like the thing I really despise is feeling like I am beholden to it. That I hate. I absolutely hate that. Because it's something that I never wanted to do. Like, I just want to make art. I don't want to have to like do all the other stuff. But things are changing, and I feel like if I don't somewhat embrace it more, then I will. The more you let it pass you by, I think the more it will keep on passing us by. It's scary, but I think that's where it comes in, where like hiring somebody who does this or is fresh to it or wants to do it more is beneficial. I haven't really thought about actually doing that, but I do know people that have that, and it's great for them. So it's just expensive.
Yeah, that's interesting. I resonate with what you're saying, Wes. Like when it goes great and it feels so cool. It feels great. It's like, cool, I'm relevant. Like people are seeing it.
I'm like, talking to new people, you know.
Yeah.
But that's also a double-edged sword, because then you end up getting like a lot of feedback that you don't want.
Yeah, which you have to really steel yourself for, and that can be horrible. That's the other thing too. Like when if a video doesn't hit the mark, doesn't grab people in those first 3 seconds, or doesn't get all those tons of views. Like I know what you're saying, like it kind of sets you up for just like almost feeling rejected or something, or like, oh, I did the thing wrong. I did, It
exacerbates the feelings that we all have. Like, are we good enough? Is the work good enough? I'll post something that I think is absolutely incredible, and it gets no feedback because the algorithms or something. And then I'll get something that's like stupid, that's like, sure, whatever. And it'll literally have I have a handful of vocals in one of my videos, and it has like 340,000 likes, and it's seen by millions of people. And I'm like, this is the most simple thing I make. And it's just like, it just drives me crazy. And yeah, it's cool, but it's also like, but there's more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I've noticed a lot of the time it's like the simplest, sometimes the dumbest things go viral, like the Prince Rupert straw. I mean, well, those are super cool, but like things that are just like something really, and it's like, but that goes viral because it's simple and people get it right away. And if they don't know a lot about glass, it'll draw them to that and give them that entry point.
I think I think we're touching on something that I want to bring up that is important to me, and I think is important to all, or should be important to everyone. I think, and it touches back to the replication of other people's work. I think we need to remind ourselves or remember that we are living in an age of novelty more than almost ever, because it is swipe by swipe. Every swipe has to be something new, right? If it's not, or if it needs to be something engaging, because if it's not, you'll unfollow that person, or it's just so fast that it's not that you have to be as fast as that, but you need to remember that you need to stay flexible, and you need to be weird, and let yourself make things that are strange and new to you. I think something that when I first started feeling like I was gaining some kind of success with Blob Blob, I think I don't remember when it happened. I just remember thinking, nobody really becomes famous or popular or infamous or whatever by doing the normal thing, right? So when you're making artwork, if you're not making things weird, strange, shocking, new, whatever, intense, then you aren't going to get the views or the fame or the money or whatever you're looking for. You have to be strange. David Bowie didn't get to be David Bowie by just sort of singing, kind of, like, you have to be weird. And I'm not saying being weird just for the sake of being weird, but like fully embrace those oddities within yourself to make the leaps that you need to make to get out of your comfort zone, get comfortable becoming uncomfortable. Because that's actually it. Yeah, because I hate being uncomfortable, but I push myself to be uncomfortable so that I find something new. I think that's what Blob Blob has really instilled in me, like trying new things. Yeah.
Well said. That was awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I think my other point that I like to say to beginner students too, when they're making work, is look for inspiration not just in glass artists, which sounds obvious, but I remember being a student, and if I wanted to make something, I would Google glass version of whatever, or if I want to make like a millipede, I Google glass millipede. And it's like, no, like look at the sources, do all your research on the science or the artistic interpretation and other fields of the artwork, so you're not just replicating what's already been done.
Everything, like if you like a certain kind of music and you're like, oh yeah, I love this music, but you aren't also somehow figuring out how that influences you in your everyday or in your work, that's important to reflect on. Like, I think it is important for you to figure out what it is you like in life, and figure out, not necessarily I like bacon, but like, what is it about a specific kind of thing? I love mushrooms and fungus because of the way that they grow and how like different they all are. They grow in all these different shapes, and like, so when I approach my work, I try to like emulate the variety of shapes and forms in life that I just like see. And when people are like, that's weird, I'm like, not really. Have you seen this thing? Not really. Have you seen this thing? It's everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's awesome too, because then it begins a conversation of, the topic as a whole, outside of, the small thing you're making in glass or whatever, but like it opens up a larger sort of like expansive discussion, which is really exciting. And I always like to think and tell students, like the sum of your personal interests, the intersection of your personal interest is your artistic voice. Amy.
Thanks. This is resonating with me, and I wanted to share something that I've been telling my students lately. A bunch of my students have been asking about venues to sell in, and I find myself saying, be the only glass person in the room.
Yes.
Yeah, like go to the studio with your glass friends and hang out and be glassy and blow glass, whatever. Do it all day long, but when it's time to sell your work, Don't go to the fair with like 5 other glass people who make the same stuff as you. Have the confidence to go to another venue and be the only glass person in the room, because then you are the novelty.
Great point.
Mose asked a good question. If you'll see that.
Yeah, Mose asks, do you think this way of playing the game is sustainable and really scalable, like paying a solid mortgage, saving longevity? That's a great question.
I think if you build it in a way that is sustainable, yes. The thing is, you have to like, and it's something I struggle with still, riding the wave of novelty is not it. You have to do that at the same time, finding something stable. So my stability comes from my like lower end things that I constantly promote. And like, I have a stable base of stuff that I sell that keeps me paid. And then it's all the weird stuff that I like kind of experiment on or try to like, it's really hard. I think it's something that you build over many years. Like I'm still figuring out how to make it fully sustainable. Yeah, Mose, what's up?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So I asked because I've talked to a few different people. West Coast is very different. So my one friend, his dad was a venture capitalist and is a venture capitalist, and he was able to get his son, $250,000 for a hot shot, like no one can really do that these days. I don't even think even in general, but, and I had set up a meeting with him and he was talking about how banks see like us, right? Like what, glass blowing is for them. And they call it, like a passion business because the majority, like the most likely, you will barely be able to break even when it's all said and done with. The only chances of actually being able to sell the business when you're done is if someone like was like a fanboy, they like the work, so realistically, like even like outside of maybe having like a scientific shop and you're trying to get like collateral, like I got this much collateral and then you go to the bank. I've been talking to some advisors and things like that, and it's just like he's like, you kind of want to get away from the art, pitch more of the scientific, the R&D stuff if you really want to get banks behind you. And then I have a good friend. So in that sense, it's very hard to get like you're gonna nickel and dime it. I'm sure we've all like bought the tool, sold some stuff, bought the other tool, sold some stuff, and built up. And every year it maybe get better, but I actually had a really good friend. I won't put his name out there just because, but he's one of the main guys that I've known who actually did like over $1 million consecutive years in glass, and one was like $250,000 one piece to like a big movie production. And then we were talking and he was like, man, sometimes I just wish that I could make like 80 to 100K, get a paycheck and not have to worry about all the BS, because he's gotten to that point where he's now like, he's bought the equipment, this and that, and he's got to sustain it all the time now, and there's no getting off of that hamster wheel, because even with his name, he might be able to, because he's high up there, but to be able to like sell that, he's got guys in other countries making the pendants and some of the other pieces. He's got another team out in LA doing something. He's trying to build a gallery in Miami and talking to the high-end clients. There's so much happening all the time. And he literally ran himself sick and had to go to the doctor. And there was a lot of issues with that. And, and I always checking on him because I'm like, I was like, man, like you're everywhere, you're doing it. And then I got to know him, and then I got to know like his life, like financially. And then I was like, whoa, it's not always greener on the other side, especially for someone he did like 1.8 one year, 2.1 the next year. you know, and then when I met him, there was like 2 houses, all these things, like all this.
Mose, I think you're talking about legitimacy and like, so what's legitimate to a corporate or to a banker, like legitimacy within the glass world and like business knowledge and all of that comes from, I think, setting yourself up in their eyes as a legitimate company. And I think for a lot of us, it's very difficult to do that without like the business education that is required for a lot of that. Also, like starting from the, like having investors and all of that is way outside of my experience. I would love that. That'd be great. But I think in order to do that kind of stuff and have it become a business that is transferable or something that grows, that can be moved. I personally would love to see Blob Blob become like a design studio that has multiple products, something that could become something that is larger than just me. But I don't know how that is going to happen, but that's kind of something I would like to go to.
Yeah, I just wonder, you know, like it's as I get, you know, older, and I think, you know, I'm blessed that the tech world brought me in because I feel now that this is becoming more of like a passion, whimsical. It's not really like I'm like, how do you make money without actually doing anything? Am I making money?
That's we got to make money by using our hands. That's how we do it.
That's not scalable, and that's not us being 65 years old, sitting back drinking Mai Tais, you know, in the Caribbean. That's like, you know, still like a lot of my mentors who are in that age, like still in the hot shop swinging glass around. So like, you know, I think about this now of like, you know, Amy's talking to her students, and I, you know, like I've been teaching more, and I'm like telling them like, hey, there's all these other things that you kind of want to be aware of, because like, how do you become a Las Vit? You know what I'm saying? Where they got like a team and they're doing design week and move on, and they got engineers and, you know, like a real solid thing. You know, even someone had posted on LinkedIn that like in the next 5 years, we're going to lose like, I think it's like next 5 to 10 years, we're losing like 2,000 scientific glass blowers. How come there aren't any scientific glass blowing shops? Just be like startups like they do, you know, the startups over the hill for me, you know, where it's like, hey, why don't we find a VC to do like a, you know, like things like that. And I'm just looking for other ways of doing things, because I just know, I mean, it may be easier in a smaller state. California, it's not scalable. And the people that I do know, like I finally got to know them, and I'm like, this isn't, you know, like gonna be in trouble if like, you know, retirement age. And I just think about that, and I just wanted to bring that up because I feel like it's something that, as you know, I turn 40 next week, and I'm really starting to think about it.
Thanks, Mose. Happy birthday.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Wes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mose, for bringing up that great point, and happy early birthday.
Thank you.
Amy, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention to Mose, I think the whole idea of identifying as an entrepreneur is finding a spot in the market that you think needs to be populated and populating that space. So it has very much to do with vision. And if you have vision and ability and kind of a unique perspective, I do believe that you can design a company or a situation for yourself that is scalable as long as you can pivot. Because you're talking about duration. And what works now might not work 5 or 10 or 15 years from now. So I think that's like an important skill to have if you're interested in scaling. And then what you're saying about geographic location, I think is important too. And that's one of the reasons why I have my studio in Brooklyn. And I came up working for other designers and working for other artists. So I have a pretty good understanding from working as the assistant how these businesses are structured for better or for worse. And so I'm hoping to be able to use that information to make my situation more sustainable for myself. But I do think only time will tell, because again, you have to be able to pivot with that.
Yeah.
I think
Great.
Janine has her hand up.
Janine.
Hey, I just wanted to ask Mose if that millionaire glass person had kids.
Yes, he has
Yeah.
kids.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, he does. He does have kids. Yeah, there's a lot. You know, like they. Are you talking about the one who is selling like a lot, like who had like those consecutive years? Yes, the son Owen is, I believe, 12 now.
Amy.
I don't. Maybe Helen can speak more to this than me. I think I might have seen it on one of her charts. But when you have, like, let's say you're an artist and your work gets picked up, it's really hot for a while, and you have a little like jaunt around the art world, that tends to last about 5 years. Because after that, you need to do R&D again. You need to reinvent yourself. You need to come up with your next thing. So being an artist by nature kind of ebbs and flows, and you need to plan for that. Because otherwise your product line is going to get stale, or your art is going to get stale.
Yeah. Or enough people will copy your product if it's so successful that you have to start to out design them.
If you are not moving at a pace that outpaces people trying to copy your work, then you are not moving fast enough. That's what I always say. If somebody's like trying to knock off your work, I personally am like, that's awesome. That's great. Like, I'm not like I want it, but like if you're going to try to do it, that's fine, because I'll be over here by the time you get here. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I'm not over here by the time you're here, if you're matching me and that's crazy, then I need to step up my game.
Yeah. The competition can keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
Like, it sucks, but it's also, it's what you should be. It can help you stay fresh.
Yeah. Also, making weird new stuff constantly will keep people confused. Never know where you're going to go. Yeah.
Hey, Al, so I just want to hop in here just to say that we're going over time. And I think if it's okay with everyone, let's continue this discussion until 9 p.m. Eastern time, because we did have some folks that joined late because of the snafu with the timing. So if anybody needs to leave, feel free. But anyone who wants to stay, let's just continue for another 20, 30 minutes or so.
I'll stay till 9. Yeah.
Sounds great. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, and any other questions or thought that's come up? I did pop a little question in the chat, which is if we have any pipe makers here in the house, or people who specifically make like that type of functional glassware. Do you have any challenges or questions or concerns that we haven't brought up yet? What platforms do you use? Are there specific challenges that you have making a product that might be legal in some states or illegal in some? Do you sell to your peers, or do you sell to clients? Is the pipe market, is the bubble bursting already? Are we still having decent sales? Yeah, I'm curious about that, if anyone has any thoughts.
I have another question to add to that.
Yeah.
If your work isn't selling, are you willing to change what it looks like?
Is that for everyone or just pipe makers?
Because we're talking about pipe makers right now, I want it specific to that. Like, if you're making spoons and your spoons aren't selling, are you willing to try and make something different?
Yeah, good question.
I've seen a lot of people that I know around me that aren't. And it's like, what are you doing? You have to change. Yeah.
Hey, exactly. Yeah, maybe it's not even a realization that maybe some people don't even know that there's an option that you can change or change your market. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So, we're starting to, round out into the portion of the meeting soon where we'll be focusing on peer-to-peer exchange. I'll have one more sort of small set of questions I'd like to point at if anyone wants to riff off of those. But with the peer-to-peer exchange, just so you guys know, this is where it's welcome. Anyone, we've kind of been doing this all night, but if there's any random resources that you want to share, pop in the chat. Or any random questions that you have for anyone here or for our guest artist Wes, please take this opportunity to do that. It's a fantastic opportunity. And some of the questions that I've been mulling over with Amy are how are ways that we can leverage technology, or are people leveraging technology in new ways, such as like productivity tools, or are you using AI at all yet to streamline functions? Do you use any AI tools? I know it's sort of like on the early end of the AI. It's still sort of recently being developed, but is anyone using that yet to any, is it useful? Is it not? Wes, did you have your hand raised?
I just literally, like, it's so stupid, but I just started thinking about using it more often. But I have been starting to use it for just like stories on Instagram, just like changing them, only to start to play with almost building, what's the word? Story? Building, gosh, I don't know what to call it. A lot of my work is based on like an item that I find to be part of a fantasy world, or is somehow grows on a different planet, or is, what's that?
The word you might have been looking for might have been narrative.
Yeah, exactly. That would make sense. That would make sense. Yeah, something to bring some more narrative to my pieces by putting them in AI settings, right? So start doing that a little bit, but playing with that a little is important to me.
Evan.
I thought of something good last night because I went to I saw a Dead Milkman concert, and something they mentioned that I thought was kind of relatable was they were saying that, one of the most important things you can do to become an artist or like start a band or do something is imagine it, and then it will eventually become a band. And he was saying that their band was a zine before it was ever, they were pretending to write about an imaginary band, and then they eventually started playing shows. And
it's funny you say
that's
that.
a good way that's a good way of thinking of narrative and things like that.
I made my business specifically to get out of the frame of the world. Like, I literally was like, I needed a space to stop thinking about sales, to stop thinking about galleries, to stop thinking about pressures or other people seeing it. And I literally made an imaginative space that I could just make whatever I wanted. So it's kind of cool. Like, I kind of made my own play space that turned into Blob Blob.
That sounds pretty similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Mose.
I'll share a story. AI. I think it's pretty cool. I think Amy knows a little bit about it. So last year, like, I had some time. I'm in Silicon Valley, whatever. So I started chat early last year, just prompting it ideas, glass, R&D stuff, cool things like that. Make a long story short, got really good at it. You guys probably know a little bit about me, but like I type how I talk. So I'm really passionate. Like, now that passion goes on to like, and I write it so it's not grammatically correct. Like, okay, I get this, but like it doesn't really like convey on paper. I totally, my chat now, she actually named herself, and then I made her her name's Atlas. But me and Atlas together last year a little bit. So from July-ish a little bit to now, I was able to acquire $22,000 from grant writing, all art grants, using AI. Pretty much just like I already had the work from prior gallery shows for the last 2 years, some other things, and then I just literally like put the artwork where it needed to be. I learned how to like read like what the grants want, and then I wrote out every single thing, and then it would prompt me. I would say spell check, grammar check, enhance to make it do whatever I needed it to do. It would spit it back out. I would then redo it again. It would spit it back out. I would prompt it to do it. Like, I would probably do that prompting probably like 3 or 4 times until I got it dialed in. And then I would read it, and then I'd be like, okay, I don't use words like that. That's way too big. Get rid of that. And then one like last final check, submit, And, you know, I think I can't remember the number. There was a good bit of them. And I landed a bunch. And then like I got, you know, I'm like on the arts council, on the grant committee, like evaluating people's grants now. But it was one of those things where like I had written them before, always got denied, or would always that's like my partner or one of my friends who's written a book and is published to like grammar check, spell check it for me. And then this just took the middleman right out. And I could like, you know, like a lot of times like when your friend spits it back, there's like that critique. You're like, well, that's what I wanted to say, but like you didn't say it right. Atlas wasn't arguing. I was like, I need it to say like this. You need to figure it out. And there was no like, you know, feedback. It's like, you know, sometimes like we all do, like we get a little hurt when someone says something about like our work, whether it's art or writing. But with this, there was none of that. I just was like, I need you to do this. And then she'd be like, okay. And I was like, I don't speak like that. Sounds like a computer. Let me change it a little bit. And I would keep just doing that. And then eventually, once like one worked, I would keep it. And then like when other ones come up, I just like almost like feed that back because I know it works and I'll just make it sound a little different. So now I have a whole bunch of archives of grants that work. So it's one of those things where, you know, just kind of like when the rubber hit the road, applied it in it. I got great results.
That's amazing. Wow. Thank you. I like the comment that Amy typed in as entrepreneurs, we wear so many hats. I love the idea of having a digital assistant to help to do tasks faster than I can spend more time in the studio. I mean, isn't that the dream? And at what point do you need to disclose your collaboration with AI? Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a great question too. Like I definitely, you know, I know if you put videos that are made with AI on at least TikTok or probably Instagram at this point, you have to like flag it and be like, made with AI. But like with writing, you know, I don't think that happens nearly as much. That's a lot, that can be a lot more like a hazy. Amy.
It's according to my research right now in this moment, AI generated images or video are not copyrightable because the only things you can copyright are something made by a human. So I'm not sure how that applies to writing exactly, but what I take that to mean, and this is all such new technology that we're still hashing out the legality and the ethics. So that's why I think it's important we're having this conversation. But that's all to say that I've been playing around with using AI and just in a whole bunch of different scenarios just to kind of see what works for me. And my general rule of thumb is change it. Don't use it straight out of the, you know, text box. Change it so that it's more of a collaboration or more of like a brainstorming tool. And then I
is a conversation. It's not the end result.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So I think ethically, that's how I proceed with AI, and I you know, we're using closed AI systems as well. So what you feed them, there's a limit to what's in there. So if you try different ones, you might get different results.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other thoughts about AI or anything like that? It is a back and forth convo, right? It's never the end result. It can be a good place to like jump off, kind of like a writing prompt or something.
Yeah. Even I think pointing to that and then thinking about it in the imaginative space that we're talking about earlier with what Evan said, like you could use it to converse about your ideas, and eventually you will end up getting maybe. Most likely you'll be inspired to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, you know, you can also do that with, you know, humans too. But, you know, if you're at home by yourself, you can do that too.
Grace asks in the chat, do you feel like AI takes away from originality?
Only if you let it. I'm not going to listen to a computer. You know, if you let it, if you just take the information from it without putting your own work into it, yeah. But I think that's also very important. Like I don't look at something that somebody else made and go, oh, I'm going to copy that, because I don't want to. I want to make something my own. I think that's part of being an artist. It's like what we were saying earlier about digesting the things that we love or see the things that we like out in the world. it's replication is one thing, but creating something new is another. It could be valid. I don't know. It just depends.
Yeah, I've seen, I don't know if any of you have seen the artist Kim Hardy, who does a lot of hot shop work, and she's used, she showed on Instagram, like she plugged her images of her sculptures into AI, and then they've like spitted out like, different versions of her work, generated through AI, which I think is fascinating. And it's fascinating how a lot of it, like it has that glassy look. It looks like something she would make, but maybe something she just didn't make. And it's a little terrifying because they look like photographs that you would take of your work. And so I'm like, oh my God, that was AI. And I think that's kind of an interesting question, and goes to that question that Grace asked about originality, because it's like some artificial intelligence is remixing your creativity. So that's cool, but it's like you're not putting your own spin on it. And like that's where I'm thinking like your artistic voice is the sum of what you have made and when your interests and your own, like where you are now and where you are then. Interesting question. Stephanie Tink says, everyone in here so far seems to be very experienced at selling their art. Does anyone have any advice for us students that are just learning the flame to start selling decent pieces, best places to post work, etc.?
In person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, you're talking to people like I've been working in glass for 17 years, so I've been selling work for about that long. Selling small flamework pendants or making paperweights. I think things are different now though. 17 years ago, like we didn't have online sales or Instagram or all that. So advice for beginners, I think, I would say regardless of what it is, like you see, this is not pointed at anybody specific. It is just a generalization. You will see people selling the crappiest work, and they will have 1 million followers selling the crappiest junk. And I used to think that's not cool. Like it's not like they should do better. I used to be like down on them. And then I realized they may not be selling it because it is the most beautiful piece, but that they have built a format to sell their work. Like they have built a following. They have built, it's marketing, right? So they have built some kind of following or platform that they can sell their work in. So I would say the best thing you could possibly do for yourself is find your confidence in your own work, regardless of whether it's perfect or not. You will draw people to your work if you are confident in your work or yourself. And if you're not, and you're putting out this air of like, it could be better, you can buy it for $5. I don't know. It's like, maybe it's not that good, but like, I would love it if you bought it so I could pay my bills. That's not what people want. People want you to be like, it may not be what I want, but it is so cool. I love it. Like work towards something and exude that confidence so that people look at your work and they think, Wes put all this work into his work because he thought that he like those things that we sell, those are pieces of us. And I would say, try to be as confident as you can, not boisterous, but like, yeah, do you understand what I'm saying? What I'm getting at is like, it is hard for people to engage with you and your work if you are not confident in it, even if you're starting.
Yeah, and it's hard. That's like a skill too that you have to grow, is confidence. And God, who wants to do that when you're figuring out how to be confident on the torch itself? Oh, it's so scary. But that's
many years.
Yeah. Janine.
I wanted to piggyback on what Wes was saying about confidence. And this is really important to remember at any age. You set the example for how you want to be treated.
Yes.
So if you come in and you take your work seriously and you are not apologetic for how weird or unconventional or not to the tastes of others you might be perceived as, you're true to yourself, and people who get you will find you and love you.
You will
And
find your audience when you are fully yourself, because the people that are not going to follow you because you aren't yourself, they aren't paying my bills. The people that care about me, the people that like my work are going to pay my bills. Everybody else that's not, I don't need to listen to them. Yeah, that's a great.
it's not the easiest path necessarily, but you'll be saving time in the long run from not trying to figure out who you are after you've been lying to yourself to try to please others.
Yes, 1000%. That's it.
Beautiful, beautifully
Also, I just wanted to add some logistical considerations to that when you're trying to figure out how to price your work. What do you want to get paid per hour? What are your costs, not just for your materials, but the overhead of your rent, your utilities, if you have insurance, if you want health insurance, if you need to take transportation to get there or to move your things around, or there are all of these little considerations that add up for cost. So, you should expect that you deserve to get paid $50 or $60 an hour and practice your craft so that you can make it more efficiently and in less time. And then figure out also what are your audiences, where are your markets, are you going to be selling only retail or also doing wholesale so that you have to cut all your prices in half again, and then are you selling through a gallery and you can't undercut them? These are all considerations, but they're questions that you have to figure out for yourself. The answers you have to figure out for yourself.
I would just add to that, what kind of life do you want to have? That's where it stems from. If you want to live a starving artist life, you will. You are your own best supporter, right? So if you want to be successful at this, you have to support yourself. And it is not selfish. It is self-interested. You are interested in taking care of yourself. You are interested in taking care of your family and your loved ones. That's very important. We aren't just doing this solely so that we can be selfish. We are doing this because we have something that we have to offer, but that we are here to support our families with it.
Amy.
I wanted to address Grace's question about how soon did you begin to sell work. I'm a few decades in, but when I first got started with Flameworking, I'm self-taught, and I just started selling at the local bead store or selling at local art events with my friends, any place where I could get a table to vend. But I would say, and then like Wes was saying, you just learn. You learn what shows are good, what venues are good, which sometimes you don't sell anything,
Sometimes it costs you $400 to get into the show and you sell $100 worth of stuff.
Right. But even if you don't sell anything and it's a terrible, vending session, you can always learn something. And so I think at the beginning of the career, that's the most important thing, right? Is pay attention to what kind of feedback you're getting from your customers, because it might not, and also get used to being okay with your customers not being able to buy your work for whatever reason, right? There was this time in my career, in my early career, where I was selling at bead stores, selling individual beads, and then eventually I kind of outgrew that market, and I knew that because my clients would give me feedback. So pay attention to what people are saying, whether they're buying or whether they're not. They'll give you feedback, and that feedback is going to tell you whether you're in the right place, even.
Yeah, you might be in the wrong market.
Yeah, you might be in the wrong market. So just keep trying until something sticks, and try not to take it personally, because it's not, I know it's your artwork, but it's not that your client is insulting your work. It's that you're trying to sell in the wrong venue.
I think
so. If you can separate those things, it's really helpful.
When you were talking about pricing earlier, I think I will get comments often, not super often, but every once in a while I will get a comment that says, "I wish I could afford your pendants." And I say, I often, I don't really know how to respond to that, because I wish you could too. I also understand that I try to make a varied price range so that people can afford some of the work. Some of the work will take me a week to make, and I cannot afford personally to make it at a lower price. And that's just how the world is. Not everybody can afford a PS5. I understand. But that is not my fault or my responsibility.
But also, when clients say something like that to you, then, one response you could give is like Wes said, I wish you could too, but you could say, there's other ways that you can support me. You can share my website. You can tell your friends, there's a lot of other ways that we can interact that doesn't involve you spending money here, and you can still be supportive, and we can both make out of this deal.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. So it's just a little after 9 o'clock. I think as we're about to start wrapping up here, if there's any final questions or comments, or Wes, if there's anything you'd like to any words of wisdom or any closing thoughts you'd like to impart with us. I mean, I think we've gotten so many wonderful nuggets of wisdom from you. Oh, and I just saw a lovely comment from Tink in the chat. I want to applaud Madeline and Amy for starting this group. Thank you. Love you. Salem represent. Yeah. Any closing thoughts or anything else?
I just want to add real quick to Grace, what Grace said. How soon did you begin to sell your work? Like, as soon as I could sell it, I would sell it. Like,
yeah, same.
There are so many things that I have in my studio currently that I don't have for sale because I am unsure about how to go about doing that. Like, I have a lot of sculptures and stuff that I want to sell, but I'm like, I don't know if I want to put all the work into selling. Basically, sell what you're comfortable selling. And I sell things that are not dangerous, like cracks, or, sell things that are whole and nice. But don't be so hard on yourself. Even things that have a small flaw, not a dangerous one like a sharp part, but like something that has like a wrong color here, or like a tiny little scuff mark. People will often see that as more special because you are like, yeah, I made this. Like, there is a market, like what I was saying earlier, there's a market for everyone. And like, there are some people that won't be able to afford the pendants that I make all the time, but I do sell seconds on occasion. And like, maybe they can afford those because it has a tiny little bubble here or something. Sell what you can when you can, but also, be confident in and be honest with your customers. Like, hey, this one isn't my best, but if you're okay with that, and more often than not, people are like, yes, I want that. I don't care about that. Yeah.
Yeah, people aren't really shopping for perfection. If so, they would get something that wasn't handmade.
Yes, 100%. I think that would be that. But I think my last thing I would say is that we have such a high standard for ourselves in the business world, in the art world. We have there's just so many standards that we're trying to achieve. And I would say that nothing large starts large. Like, it has to start somewhere small. And you putting the effort in day by day is really important, and little by little. You will become discouraged. Not every day will go well. The wins will come, the fails will come. The thing that really shows success is when you can fail over and over and over and still get back up again. That is success. It is not constant uphill. It is hitting the downhills and then going back up, right? And I think as artists in general, like, it is kind of impossible for us to stop fully. Like, even if I went and got a corporate job and made, a regular paycheck every week, every month or whatever, I would still need to do something because I can't do that. So just try to roll with the punches, and little successes add up to big successes. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. Wonderful. That's a great point. Little successes add up to big successes. Don't lose track. Don't lose sight of the small progress that's made.
You will surprise yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. And a huge thank you to Wes Heart of Blob Blob Studio for being our wonderful guest artist. And thank you for all your wisdom. It's been so wonderful. Amy, can I pass it back to you if there's any closing remarks on your end?
Yeah, I just want to echo, thank you, Wes, for sharing the knowledge. Thank you so much. You're the perfect guest for tonight's discussion.
Have me on.
Awesome. And I just also want to acknowledge and thank so many first-time Flame Affinity Group attendees tonight. Thank you for taking a chance on the meeting tonight, and I hope you had a good time. And I hope you'll join us again. And thanks all for coming. It was refreshing to see like a new group tonight. So yeah, so that's great. This is our end of the season. This is our second meeting this season of GEEX. And so we are going to break from the summer, and then we'll reconvene in the fall with a new topic. And so look out for, make sure you follow GEEX on your social media so that you can look out for when we're having a next meeting. And then also you'll get email blasts as well when we're having an upcoming meeting too. So we hope to see you again. Hope you can tune in with us. And if you have any ideas for topics that might be good, feel free to pop it in the chat or reach out to either of us or to GEEX, because we would love to know what your feedback is so that we can plan next season with you all in mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, everybody. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Hey, this is Emily from GEEX, aka the Glass Education Exchange. GEEX is an online platform connecting people and sharing materials in the collective field of glass education. That's a bit of a mouthful. So what does it actually mean? GEEX creates supportive spaces outside of traditional academic structures to offer community-building programming and resources. Programs like the Flame Affinity Group offer a space for constructive dialogue between practitioners in the field. We're hoping to nudge the field of glass into its next generation through new models of community support. This recording is also available through one of our initiatives, the Glass Resource Exchange. The Glass Resource Exchange is a user-contributed library collecting and sharing educational material like articles, supply lists, videos, and more. We're hoping to see it grow as a common resource supporting glass teaching and learning. Want to support GEEX? Small donations really help us continue building our communal programming. Alternatively, you can subscribe to our lecture series, featuring outstanding glass artists and researchers. Learn more at geeks.glass/support. Thanks for watching. Want updates on new GEEX programs and resources? Follow @GeeksGlass on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, or visit our website, geeks.glass. Thanks again, and stay tuned.